The US-China trade war, initiated by the Trump administration in 2018, has disrupted supply chains and rattled financial markets. The US imposed tariffs on Chinese goods, citing unfair trade practices, while China retaliated with tariffs on American products. This tit-for-tat exchange has fueled global uncertainty, affecting businesses and consumers worldwide. The trade war reflects a deeper shift in global power, highlighting China's rise and the relative decline of American hegemony. The trade war's impact extends beyond the US and China, exposing the fragility of the global trading system. Countries worldwide face difficult choices navigating the competing interests of the two superpowers. The trend toward deglobalization has accelerated, with businesses seeking to shorten supply chains or bring them back home. This shift could lead to reduced efficiency, higher costs, and slower growth for the global economy. Within the US, the trade war has had mixed reactions, benefiting some sectors while hurting others. Farmers, manufacturers, and consumers have felt the pinch of higher prices and disrupted markets. Critics argue that tariffs are counterproductive, raising prices and disrupting supply chains. The trade war exposes the limitations of protectionism in a globalized world, potentially leading to economic stagnation. The BRICS nations are emerging as a counterweight to the US-led global order, promoting an alternative model of economic cooperation. They criticize the US's unilateral trade approach and strengthen their own economic ties. The trade war presents challenges and opportunities for BRICS, exposing them to negative spillovers but also creating space to increase their influence. The BRICS aim to promote a multipolar world order, reducing reliance on Western-dominated financial institutions. Trump's trade policies have drawn accusations of ulterior motives and potential illegality. Critics argue that Trump's actions benefit his businesses and those of his associates, raising questions about conflicts of interest. Instances of favorable treatment for Trump's hotels and family business deals have fueled these concerns. Critics contend that Trump's arbitrary and inconsistent trade policies undermine the rule of law and damage US credibility. Accusations of insider trading have plagued the Trump administration, with critics alleging profit from tariff announcements. Suspicious trading activity in steel and aluminum stocks before tariff announcements raised eyebrows. The administration's lack of transparency and efforts to obstruct investigations have fueled suspicions. Concerns about lobbyist influence and the revolving door between the administration and corporate lobbying firms deepen these worries. The steel and aluminum tariffs, citing national security, sparked accusations of cronyism. Critics argue the tariffs benefited companies with ties to the Trump administration. The tariffs triggered retaliatory measures from key trading partners, raising concerns about a potential trade war. The episode highlighted the administration's willingness to use national security as a justification for protectionist measures. Accusations of impropriety in Trump's trade policies became entangled in the first impeachment inquiry. The inquiry focused on Trump's efforts to pressure Ukraine to investigate political rivals while withholding military aid. Evidence suggested Trump's lawyer leveraged economic relationships for political gain. The inquiry highlighted the intertwining of personal and political interests with foreign policy and economic statecraft. The US-China trade war has sent shockwaves through the global economy, impacting businesses and consumers worldwide. The IMF has downgraded global growth forecasts, citing tariffs as a key factor. Germany, heavily reliant on exports, has been hit hard, raising fears of a broader recession in the Eurozone. The trade war has dampened business investment, contributing to slower growth and job losses. The trade war has exposed vulnerabilities in the globalized economy, disrupting supply chains. The technology sector, reliant on global supply chains, has been significantly impacted. Companies are diversifying supply chains to reduce risks, leading to higher costs and increased complexity. The trend towards diversification highlights the risks of overdependence on a single supplier, particularly China. Emerging markets have been caught in the crossfire of the US-China trade war, facing economic headwinds. The trade war has put downward pressure on commodity prices, hurting commodity exporting countries. Increased volatility in global financial markets has made it difficult for emerging markets to access capital. These countries navigate a complex geopolitical landscape, balancing relations with both the US and China. The trade war has spilled into currency markets, raising concerns about a potential currency war. The US accuses China of manipulating its currency, while China argues its movements are market-driven. The US Federal Reserve's interest rate cuts have put downward pressure on the US dollar. A currency war could lead to protectionist measures, undermining global trade and investment, and creating financial instability. Section 5, the WTO under siege, the unraveling of the global trading order. The US-China trade war has not only strained bilateral relations but also undermined the rules-based global trading system, with the World Trade Organization, WTO, at the center of the storm. The Trump administration has repeatedly criticized the WTO, accusing it of being ineffective in addressing China's unfair trade practices and biased against US interests. The US has blocked the appointment of judges to the WTO's appellate body, the organization's highest dispute settlement body, effectively paralyzing its ability to resolve trade disputes. This has created a vacuum in the global trading system, leaving countries without a neutral arbiter to adjudicate trade disputes and enforce existing rules. The Trump administration's actions have been widely condemned by other WTO members, who argue that they undermine the organization's legitimacy and threaten to unravel the rules-based trading system that has underpinned global economic growth for decades. The weakening of the WTO has created uncertainty and instability in the global trading system, leaving countries to fend for themselves and potentially leading to a resurgence of protectionism. Main Street, Blues American protests against the trade war. Across the United States, a wave of protests has erupted against the Trump administration's trade policies. Farmers, factory workers, teachers, and small business owners have taken to the streets. United by their anxieties about the future, in the heartland, farmers have organized tractorcades, driving their massive machines down city streets. They carry signs with slogans like "Tariffs hurt the heartland" and "Trade not aid." In industrial towns, factory workers have seen the trade war exacerbate their economic anxieties. Plant closures and layoffs have mounted in industries hit hard by tariffs. Union halls have become hubs of organizing against the trade war's impact. The protests have not been limited to those directly impacted by the trade war. Teachers, students, and healthcare workers have joined the demonstrations. They argue that the trade war is a distraction from more pressing domestic issues. Farmers under fire, from fields of gold to mountains of debt. The American heartland, once a bastion of support for Donald Trump, has become a battleground in the trade war as farmers bear the brunt of retaliatory tariffs imposed by China and other trading partners. Soybeans, once a lucrative export crop for American farmers, have piled up in silos, their market value plummeting as China, once the largest importer of US soybeans, turned to alternative suppliers like Brazil and Argentina. The Trump administration's attempts to mitigate the damage with billions of dollars in farm subsidies have done little to quell the anxieties of farmers, many of whom view the payments as a band-aid solution that fails to address the long-term damage inflicted by the trade war. The subsidies, they argue, are a stopgap measure that cannot replace the lost markets and broken relationships that were years in the making. The trade war has pushed many family farms, already struggling with rising debt levels and shrinking profit margins, to the brink of financial ruin. Bankruptcies and farm foreclosures have surged in farm states across the Midwest and Great Plains as farmers unable to make ends meet are forced to sell their land, often passed down through generations, to make ends meet. The rural economy, heavily dependent on agriculture, has slowed significantly, with ripple effects felt throughout rural communities. The plight of American farmers in the trade war highlights the interconnectedness of the global economy and the unintended consequences of protectionist policies. The tariffs intended to protect American jobs and industries have backfired, harming the very people they were supposed to help and undermining the economic security of rural America. Manufacturing migraines, factory closures, and job losses mount. The promise of reviving American manufacturing was a central theme of Donald Trump's presidential campaign, but the reality of the trade war has painted a far different picture for many factory workers and manufacturing communities across the United States. While the Trump administration touts the tariffs as a boon for American manufacturing, the evidence on the ground tells a more nuanced and often grim story. While some sectors, like steel and aluminum, experienced a short-lived boost in production and employment in the immediate aftermath of the tariffs, these gains have been overshadowed by the broader negative impact of the trade war on the manufacturing sector as a whole. The tariffs have increased the costs of imported inputs for manufacturers, making American-made goods less competitive in both domestic and international markets. Factory closures and layoffs have mounted in industries ranging from auto parts and appliances to machinery and electronics as companies grapple with higher costs, disrupted supply chains, and declining demand. The trade war has exacerbated existing challenges facing American manufacturing, including automation, globalization, and a shortage of skilled labor, further eroding the competitiveness of American industry. The trade war's impact on manufacturing has been particularly acute in states like Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. These states, once strongholds of American manufacturing and key battlegrounds in presidential elections, have seen factory closures and job losses mount, fueling economic anxieties and political polarization. The trade war has become a potent symbol of the economic anxieties and uncertainties facing many working-class Americans. Section 4. Consumers feeling the pinch, rising prices and shrinking wallets. The US-China trade war, while often framed as a battle between governments and corporations, is ultimately a story about people, and its impact is most keenly felt in the pocketbooks of ordinary Americans. The tariffs, essentially taxes on imported goods, have rippled through the US economy, driving up prices for a wide range of consumer goods, from washing machines and refrigerators to clothing, toys, and electronics. While the Trump administration has downplayed the impact of tariffs on consumers, arguing that the costs are minimal and outweighed by the benefits of protecting American jobs, studies by economists and independent research groups paint a different picture. These studies estimate that the tariffs have cost the average American household hundreds of dollars per year in higher prices, with low-income households disproportionately affected. The trade war's impact on consumer prices has been particularly pronounced in certain sectors, like agriculture and technology. The price of soybeans, a key ingredient in many processed foods, has soared due to retaliatory tariffs imposed by China, leading to higher prices for everything from tofu and soy milk to animal feed and cooking oil. Similarly, the tariffs on imported electronics and components have driven up the prices of smartphones, laptops, and other consumer electronics, impacting both household budgets and corporate profits. The trade war's impact on consumer spending, a key driver of economic growth, has been significant. Faced with rising prices and economic uncertainty, consumers have become more cautious in their spending habits, delaying major purchases and cutting back on discretionary spending. This slowdown in consumer spending has rippled through the economy, impacting businesses large and small and contributing to slower economic growth. Section 5. A house divided, the trade war deepens political polarization. The US-China trade war, far from being a purely economic issue, has become deeply enmeshed in the hyper-partisan politics of the United States, further dividing an already polarized nation. The trade war has become a rallying cry for both supporters and opponents of Donald Trump, fueling divisions along party lines and exacerbating existing political fault lines. Trump's supporters, many of whom feel left behind by globalization and economic change, view the trade war as a necessary corrective, a way to stand up to China and other trading partners that they believe have taken advantage of the United States for too long. They see the tariffs as a way to protect American jobs, revive domestic manufacturing, and restore America's economic dominance on the world stage. Trump's opponents, on the other hand, view the trade war as reckless and counterproductive, a self-inflicted wound that is harming the US economy, alienating allies, and undermining the rules-based global trading system. They argue that the tariffs are hurting American businesses and consumers, raising prices, disrupting supply chains, and jeopardizing economic growth. They see the trade war as a symptom of Trump's go-it-alone approach to foreign policy, which they believe is weakening America's standing in the world. The trade war has become a wedge issue in American politics, exploited by both parties to mobilize their bases and demonize their opponents. The debate over the trade war has been characterized by misinformation, hyperbole, and a lack of nuanced understanding of the complex issues at play. The trade war has become a proxy for broader debates about globalization, American power, and the future of the international order. Section 1. BRICS, a new dawn in the East. As the US-China trade war disrupts the global order, a new dynamic is emerging. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, are seizing the opportunity to assert their influence. They are increasingly acting as rule makers, shaping a multipolar world. The BRICS offer a vision of a more equitable global order. They have created institutions like the New Development Bank, challenging the dominance of the World Bank and IMF. Despite internal divisions, their shared interest in reshaping the global order drives cooperation. Section 2. China's calculated maneuvers, forging alliances and expanding influence. China, the world's second-largest economy, is at the heart of BRICS influence. The trade war has pushed China to reduce its dependence on the US and establish dominance in Asia. China has retaliated with tariffs and diversified its trading partners. The Belt and Road Initiative is key to expanding China's influence. China has strengthened political and security ties with BRICS partners. Its rise challenges US hegemony, creating new alliances and reshaping global power. Section 3. BRICS, a counter-narrative to Western hegemony. The BRICS nations represent a powerful counter-narrative to the Western-centric view of the world. Their rise challenges the notion that Western values are universal, offering alternative models of development and governance. The BRICS emphasize national sovereignty, non-interference, and multilateralism. They advocate for a more equitable distribution of power and resources in the global system. Promoting South-South cooperation, they seek to reduce dependence on the West. The BRICS' vision of a multipolar world represents a significant departure from the unipolar moment. Section 4. The road ahead, a multipolar world takes shape. The US-China trade war has accelerated the transition to a multipolar world, a world where power is more diffuse, alliances are more fluid, and no single country or bloc of countries can dictate the terms of global engagement. This new world order is characterized by both cooperation and competition, as countries seek to advance their interests in a more complex and interconnected world. The rise of the BRICS is a defining feature of this multipolar world. The BRICS nations, with their growing economic might, political influence, and demographic weight, are reshaping the global balance of power. They are challenging the dominance of the West, offering alternative models of development and governance, and forging new alliances that bypass traditional power structures. The road ahead in this multipolar world is fraught with uncertainty. The US-China rivalry, if not managed carefully, could escalate into a new Cold War, dividing the world into competing blocs and stifling global cooperation on pressing issues like climate change, pandemics, and nuclear proliferation. The rise of nationalism, populism, and protectionism also threatens to undermine the rules-based international order that has underpinned global peace and prosperity for decades. However, the multipolar world also presents opportunities for cooperation and progress. The BRICS nations, with their emphasis on multilateralism and dialogue, could play a constructive role in bridging divides and fostering cooperation on shared challenges. The growing interconnectedness of the global economy creates incentives for countries to find common ground and work together to address common threats. The future of the multipolar world will be shaped by the choices that countries make today, whether to embrace cooperation or succumb to division and conflict. The US-China trade war has exposed the shifting global balance of power. The unipolar moment of US dominance is fading, replaced by a fragmented multipolar world. This transition presents opportunities for a more equitable global order. The trade war reveals the limits of US unilateral actions. China, emboldened by its economic might, challenges US dominance. This assertive China is a force to be reckoned with. The trade war's effects extend beyond the US and China. Traditional alliances are strained by the dispute. The EU struggles to balance ties with the US and China. Developing countries gain leverage in global negotiations. The shifting sands of global power create anxieties and possibilities. The potential for conflict is real as powers adjust, yet this flux offers a chance for a more stable global order. The US-China trade war highlights the dangers of protectionism in a global economy. Tariffs and trade barriers harm businesses, consumers, and workers on both sides. Nations cannot prosper in isolation. Global flows drive growth. The casualties are many. Farmers and factory workers face lost markets and jobs. Consumers worldwide feel the pinch of rising prices. The trade war erodes trust and cooperation. It fuels nationalism and protectionism. The legacy is a cautionary tale for policymakers. Embrace openness and cooperation for sustained prosperity. The US-China trade war has opened space for other global actors to assert themselves, challenging the West's dominance in global governance. The BRICS nations are at the forefront of this reimagining, offering a vision of a more multipolar world. They challenge Western-dominated institutions like the IMF and World Bank and call for UN Security Council reforms. The BRICS aim to create a more equitable global order. Their success will shape the future of global governance. The US-China trade war has accelerated the world's transition to a multipolar order, a complex and evolving landscape where power is more diffuse, alliances are more fluid, and no single country or bloc of countries can dictate the terms of global engagement. This new world order presents both opportunities and challenges, demanding creativity, adaptability, and a willingness to embrace a more nuanced and inclusive approach to international relations. In a multipolar world, the zero-sum mentality that characterized the Cold War era is no longer tenable. The challenges facing humanity in the 21st century, climate change, pandemics, terrorism, cyber warfare, transcend national borders and require collective action to address effectively. No single country, however powerful, can solve these problems alone. The multipolar world demands a new paradigm of global governance, one based on dialogue, cooperation, and a shared commitment to addressing common challenges. Navigating the uncertain terrain of a multipolar world will require deft diplomacy, a willingness to build bridges across cultural and ideological divides, and a commitment to multilateral institutions and rules-based order. It will also require a recognition that power is not a zero-sum game and that cooperation, rather than confrontation, offers the best hope for achieving shared goals. The multipolar world is still taking shape, its contours fluid and its future uncertain. The choices that countries make today, whether to embrace cooperation or succumb to division, whether to uphold the rules-based order or retreat into nationalism and protectionism, will determine the course of the 21st century and beyond. The stakes are high, but so too are the possibilities for a more peaceful, just and prosperous world.